Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about the new darling team in the NBA, and that is the Memphis Grizzlies. But really quickly, before we get started, if you enjoy the NBA, then consider subscribing. I upload basically every single day. Okay, so it seems like this happens every single year, right? Like there's one team that for whatever reason sticks out. And it can be, like I said, for a variety of different reasons. A couple of years ago, it was the Warriors. A few years past that, it was the Isaiah Thomas Celtics. Last year, it was probably like the Sacramento Kings. Early in this season, it was teams like the Phoenix Suns that were a lot better than maybe we thought that they would be coming into the season. They've kind of fallen off. And now the team that has taken that position in the hearts of NBA fans is the Memphis Grizzlies. And a lot of it does definitely have to do with Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. and Morant specifically coming into the league with so much confidence, playing extremely well, having this ability to put up highlight reel plays seemingly every single night and talking trash and backing it up. And he's a guy that is quickly becoming a fan favorite around the league. And then there's Jaren Jackson Jr. as well, who is a player that was, I would say, pretty polarizing the year that he came out in 2018 in the draft. I mean, we had Luka, we had guys like Trae Young, we had guys like Mo Bamba, DeAndre Ayton, and Jaren Jackson Jr. kind of got forgotten about a little bit as this player that was so versatile, that could shoot threes, that could defend. And I thought he was perfect for the modern NBA game, but a lot of other people didn't agree with me. And at the time, I had him at number 2 in my own player rankings and mock draft for that draft class, behind only Luka. I thought he was the second best player in the class. And the only reason that he didn't put up better stats in college was because he just couldn't stay on the floor and he fouled too much. And in his first couple of years in the league, that has still been the case. But really quickly, let's listen back on some of the things I had to say about Jaren Jackson Jr. back in that 2018 class. All right, this one is probably a fairly big surprise to most, but outside of Luka Doncic, Jaren Jackson is my favorite player in this draft. And seeing as how the Kings have been searching for a quality 4-man for what seems like forever, this is a great match. I don't often throw out player comparisons and these kinds of things, but I'll make an exception in this case. In my eyes, Jaren Jackson is a 2018 version of Chris Bosh in his time with the Miami Heat. He's the most complete big man in this draft class and has the mobility and fluidity to be an impact player on both ends of the floor. At 6'11" with a 7'4" wingspan, Jackson shot nearly 40% from 3 on over 2.5 attempts per game in his one season in college, while also showing great rim protection ability with a 3 blocks per game average, all in just under 22 minutes per game. The reason that I bring up the Jaren Jackson Jr. thing is to say that, I've always thought highly of this guy. It's not like now that he's playing well, I'm like, oh, I'm on the Jaren Jackson Jr. bandwagon. So I've been on his side this entire time. But those two guys are primarily, I would say, what is fueling, the love for this Grizzlies team. But they have plenty of other really good players on this roster. Brandon Clark has looked like the steal of the draft to this point from this most recent draft class, is a hyper-efficient scorer in the paint and the 5th leading scorer on this team. Then you've got other guys that they acquired in the Conley and Gasol trades that are playing well as well, like Jonas Valanciunas, who's having another really good season as their starting 5, and to a lesser extent, guys like Jae Crowder and Grayson Allen. So these are all players that people are aware of, people know about, and when they're playing as well as they are right now, people are going to pay attention. This is a team that has won 6 straight games, including wins over the Rockets and the Spurs and the Clippers, and they've also won in total 7 of their last 8. So this is a team that people are really starting to pay attention to, and that a lot of people seem to love. And to add on to that, NBA Twitter and NBA fan bases in general love a team that builds themselves up through smart front office moves, right? Like there's definitely the flashy teams that go out and get the big free agents and all of a sudden they're good, but teams like Memphis that have just continued to make smart moves definitely, get a little bit of extra credit from certain types of NBA fans, and that is where this Grizzlies team resides. When you're thinking about, the Gasol and the Conley trades, it was pretty well known for, I'd say, about a year and a half that those guys were at least on the trade block. Whether they were actively looking to trade them or not, teams knew that if they called, they could probably throw an offer or two that Memphis would listen to for Gasol or for Conley, but they were patient, they took their time, and it might not really seem like it in hindsight, but they actually got a tremendous amount of value for those two players, considering their age, considering their contracts. Gasol was a guy that, had a player option for this offseason, and Conley is going to be paid a ton of money for the next 2 years, this season and the next, not playing outstandingly in Utah, as I talked about in yesterday's video. And so when you're considering, the situation that they were in 2 years ago with those two players, to get this kind of value back is pretty incredible. This is the list of assets that they had in return return. Some of this is by proxy through future trades, but just in general, for the players that they received in those trades, they got, let me find it here, Utah's 2020 first round pick, multiple second round picks, Grayson Allen, Jae Crowder, who I think is movable at the trade deadline if they wanted to get even more assets out of a contender that needs another wing, Josh Jackson, who could still be something in the G League, DeAnthony Melton, who is a kind of interesting young player, Brandon Clark, as we talked about, and Jonas Valanciunas as well. And again, when you consider the situations of both Conley and Gasol, that is a tremendous return and value for the Memphis Grizzlies. And again, you have to understand, like 2 years ago, this was a team that we were looking at thinking, what are they really going to be in the future? It didn't really seem like they had much of a direction. Gasol and Conley were known to be on the trade block, but Conley was dealing with an injury issue. Gasol was unhappy with how bad the team was, and it wasn't a good vibe around this team. And not only that, but they owe their future, this year's pick to the Celtics, top 6 protected, and if they don't give it up this year, then it's unprotected next year. And so in general, you just looked at their situation and were like, there's not a whole lot going for this team. And certainly they had a little bit of lottery luck to get someone like Jaren Jackson and Ja Morant, at the picks that they did, but at the same time, they have to identify the guys that they really want and identify them as future stars, as I think they're going to be moving forward. And they started with this base of, these are our 2 guys, right? Like they fit well together. They make sense on the floor at the same time. They're both going to be really good. They're versatile. They're both so young because they're, Morant was a 2 and done and Jackson Jr. was a 1 and done player. And they said, what other pieces can we put around them and be smart about building up this roster? And that's how you end up with guys like Valanciunas, guys like Clark, guys like Crowder, and even Dillon Brooks, who I didn't even mention earlier, who's having a bounce-back season this year. Still not the most efficient scorer, but a nice two-way player as a defender and someone that can definitely make some shots. And they said, let's just get as much future, talent around these guys and pieces around them that make sense as possible. And again, that has made them kind of the darling of the league now. And of course, these things are going to go up and down, right? Like they could go on a losing streak and people will be like, I'm not really that big of a fan of Memphis, but to have what appears to be the runaway rookie of the year in Ja Morant and one of the best second-year players outside of Luka and Trae Young in Jaren Jackson Jr. as well shows, what kind of direction this team has moving forward. And I also think it's interesting, similar to how we talked about the Oklahoma City rebuild a few days ago, they're kind of showing the value of having like other veteran guys, other guys that know what they're doing in the NBA on this roster, like Crowder, like Valanciunas, because when you're looking around the league, there's plenty of rebuild situations like the Suns prior to this year and the Hawks now currently that are just focusing on having basically an entire roster of 24 and under guys and not having any veterans and being just as bad as possible and getting young guys as much playing time as possible. And obviously Atlanta, they have guys like Vince Carter and things like that. But this Memphis team is really showing the importance that it makes sense and it helps your team to have guys that actually know what it's like to be on a good NBA team. Guys like Jae Crowder, guys like Jonas Valanciunas. And it's really appearing to help this team because in those other rebuilds at times you can kind of see the wheels start to fall off a little bit. And that doesn't appear to be the case in Memphis. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the one bummer here is that unfortunately, in terms of their rebuild, they don't have control over their first round pick either this year or next. As I said, it's top 6 protected to the Celtics this year, then it's unprotected next year if they don't give it up, which is definitely a bummer because it appears as though they're going to have to give up this year's unless there's some weird lottery stuff that happens based off of their current record. But regardless, I just wanted to make this video to give them some credit. As like I said, one of the favorite teams across the league. They have players that are young, that make sense together, that are versatile, that people love. At least I think people love Ja Morant. Maybe some of the, the cockiness could start to rub people the wrong way. But in general, I just wanted to give them a shout out because I talked about this last offseason in terms of this was a team that was making all of the right moves, but I didn't expect it to come together this quickly. And obviously I don't expect them to win, 7 out of 8 for the rest of the year, but they're showing, again, similar to Oklahoma City, a little bit of a different way to rebuild. And you don't have to make all of these big moves. You don't have to tank. Get a couple of really good young players that fit well together, find some other pieces around them, make some smart moves. If you have veterans to trade away, trade them. And, again, they were in about as bad of a situation as you could be 2 years ago in terms of their future, given their aging players and things like that. And they've turned it around very, very quickly. And moving forward, It's all going to depend on what level that Jaren Jackson Jr. Ja Morant combination gets to. If those guys are like all NBA type players, then they're set, and all they have to do is just continue to build up, all the other pieces around them. Hopefully they get to keep their draft pick this year. They'll definitely get to keep it next year, even if they give it up this year, and just continue to build this roster. And within the next 2 years, depending on the development of Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr., these guys are going to be really, really good. I'm not quite ready to compare it to the Oklahoma City days when they had KD, Russ, and Harden and Ibaka. But in terms of young talent and making all the right moves, this team is right up there. And again, that's why I think that they are quickly becoming kind of the favorite team for a lot of people around the NBA. So huge shout out to the Memphis Grizzlies, which is not something I really expected to be saying this season, at least not at this point in the year. But like I said, that's going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. As I said in the beginning, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.